up, beasties? It's Triple B, your friendly neighborhood bearded book beast. And I have got a special guest today that I am very excited to have on the channel, and we are going to have some fun. So I will let him say hello and introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Andrew D. Meredith. I'm an author. I was only invited on here because we both have great beards.
Yes.
And so I'm the author of the Kallattian Saga, the Needle and Leaf series, and the Sideways Tales series. And I've got currently 6 books out, which you can see here. Well, 6. I don't have one of them here, but there is 6 here because the 4th one's coming out in a couple months, and lots more to come.
Yes, and I've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
I got Thrice, the first book in Needle and Leaf, and I get so turned around on here when I'm looking in the Let me bring those closer. But I'm going to be finishing this one up. I started it. It's very good.
Awesome.
And then Quaint Creatures, Magical and Mundane, this awesome, cozy book right here. I'm going to be reading that. And then there's another series that I'm excited to read of yours that I don't have yet for a very good reason.
Yes.
And I'll kind of let you get into that. That's a big reason that we're here. We're pumped. We're excited. We're going to talk all about Kickstarter.
Yes. So the Kallattian Saga is finally on Kickstarter. I launched the series in 2022. Yep. And then released the first 2 books, which is Deathless Beast and Bone Shroud, which look nothing like that if you're looking for them online. That's why we're kickstarting it, because book 3 came out in 2023, and now Dread Knight is, and these are mocks, so the art's not final, but still. Dread Knight is book 4, and it finishes the first arc of the series. And because it's coming out, I decided let's go all out and do new covers for all 4 of them, so they're matching. So anybody who wants to get in for the first time can have matching books, and more importantly, hardcovers. So I have not done hardcovers on my books yet, so this is the first chance for me to do that. And the only way to get hardcovers from me will be through the Kickstarter, and then after that through my website. I'm not going to release hardcovers out to all the various sundry places because come to me. Why not? Right. And the huge advantage of that is because I'm doing my dust covers with a local printer. So they'll be 2-sided now because we unlocked that. The hardcovers will be naked covers with dust covers with the images you see here. And then on the inside will be a full map.
Nice.
All the way stretched. So if you are somehow semi-obsessive and want to frame it and put it on your wall, by all means, you can do that. Yes.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So I love those covers, and I like the old covers too. Like you always have such good artwork. Like even your other books I showed you, you do a good job with that.
Thank you. I do like the original art for Kallattian, but I feel like these better they better market the books for what they actually are. So if you were looking at Deathless Beast and thinking, oh, this is gonna be a good dark fantasy, it's not so dark as that. Not that it's not dark, it's not grim dark. Right. And so I needed, and it's very medieval and lots of religious orders. And so I really wanted something that was going to be evocative of that.
Yeah. I feel like that's a great fit. The covers that you have now. Yeah, that's very good. I think when you showed that last cover, it made me think. I remembered I came on a live stream you did, and I can't remember. Is it that one where like the face of the character was like
my grandpa? Yeah. So cool. Dorian right there. See if it actually focus. Might not. Dorian is he's my grandpa's face for that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I dedicated Bone Shroud to my grandparents.
Nice.
And the whole story, the whole first books especially, are a story of the torch being passed from one generation to the other.
Okay.
Whether good or bad. So that's a major theme that I was examining. And what happens when you do have a generation that has a strong legacy, has been around for 80 years, passing off to a new generation that either does or does not want it in the first place. What happens? So that was a huge theme.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I guess while we're talking about that, I should let you. I mean, you've kind of already done it, but just let everybody know like what that series is about. Like, what's your pitch for it?
So Deathless Beast is a story about a pair of siblings. They're both mercenaries, and they have a fairly successful entourage. They lead up and down the continent, north to south, 3 times a year. Well, 1 time a year, and then once or twice a year, and then they've hired others who will then lead other caravans so they can keep it going. And their old boss rolls into town, who got them the job in the first place, and he has a huge opportunity to escort some monks, and by doing that, help legitimize the whole organization more with the organizations that look down upon them. And so they need to get out of town because there's a bully in their entourage they can't get rid of because they needed him for legitimization. And so they jump ship and leave town to go find some better work up north. Same time, there is a paladin who he's just a guard, and he has a bad background. He became a paladin because he was a murderer, and that was his out for being executed. And then his god just shows up and says, "Hey, I want you to be my champion," while the organization is collapsing around him because of heresy and miscommunication. And he's like, "Well, why would you choose me?" Right. And so that's kind of the theme of his story, is why would you choose me when I'm just a nobody and an ex-murderer, and that's kind of the point, is that's why he's chosen. And then the last main character, at least in the first book, is Kallattian, who's a physician, and she's early 20s. She's the physician to the head of her religious organization, and she wants choice in her life. She wants to go to college. She wants to get a real physician's education, and her aunt's like, sorry, I'm almost 100 years old. I kind of need you here. Tough luck. When I'm dead, you can go. And she doesn't like that, but she's given a mysterious seed pod that has been kind of floating around on various desks for hundreds of years, but doesn't appear to have ever aged. And so she starts to unravel the mystery of the seed pod, and hijinks ensue, as I often say.
Oh man.
Yeah. And then there's a character trying to kill the gods, but you know,
you gotta have that. Stuff. You gotta have that.
Yeah.
You had me at mercenaries.
Yeah.
I was already there. I'm good. Awesome. It sounds so good, man. That's a good pitch. I mean, this is your baby. Like, I mean,
this one is my baby. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. My other babies have become my babies as well, but this was the one that's what started it all. Yes. And
this is your oldest baby.
Yes, it is my old. It is definitely my oldest.
Your oldest child. Oh man.
When you look at it that way, even though Thrice was released first, it's totally my middle child, and Quaint Creatures is my youngest. Absolutely.
Oh no, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thrice did come out before.
Yeah. It came out in late 2021, and I wrote it after, while I was out pitching Collation to agents, and said I need to write something totally new, and I challenged myself to prepare very little. And then I started writing it, and wrote it over a winter, and then was pitching that one too. And then COVID happened, and so my wife and I had been thinking about indie, and we said, well, it's a lot of work, but now we have time, and so we jumped over into indie and spent a whole year preparing Thrice for release in her first book, and then that gave us the lessons we needed to learn in order to release our other books. And so then Collation came out middle of 2022, and rest is history. And the sequel to Thrice, and figuring out in 2022, in 2021. So I always release my audiobooks along with my books. So when Thrice came out at the end of 2021, it's because I had been recording it and working on it from the beginning of that year too. So that was part of the learning curve, was making sure that we had audiobooks. That was a huge decision that we made early on, that we had to do that on release day.
Nice. And you just mentioned it. If anybody doesn't know, Andrew does his own audiobooks, and he is fantastic.
I do. Yeah, I just got the edits back for Dread Knight, so tomorrow I'm going to start recording.
Awesome. That's so good. It's so good. I mean, it's awesome that you, not only that you do it yourself, but that you're good at doing it yourself.
Thank you.
Like, because I do have Deathless Beast.
Yep.
And I started to listen to it, but then when I found out about the Kickstarter, I'm like, I'm gonna wait.
Yeah.
And then I'll do both at the same time.
And I not just recorded my own books, I recorded
and you do other
Tori Tekkens.
You're an audio book, audio narrator.
Yes. So I'm a narrator for hire as well.
Yep. Jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So, all right, I will have the Kickstarter linked in the description below.
Yep.
Go check it out. This is going to come out where there's still some time left, so people will still be able to
through August 31st
on board. Yep, you guys will have 12 days. Get on it, because I did, and I'm excited, and they're going to be gorgeous.
Yes,
and you definitely want to be a part of this. So
we've unlocked a lot of stretch goals already.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a little reminder down there, people, to go do it. Description down below, there'll be a link. So I guess we talked about what the series is and the book. People know it's on Kickstarter. Some of the cool things about the editions themselves and all that kind of stuff.
Well, speaking of stretch goals, we've unlocked additional bookmarks, which I've already gotten in, so I can put those in the box. Some great vinyl stickers, so you have to put stickers on your water bottles. Got those. But I just for the fun of it drew 4 more, so I may put something in after the Kickstarter for backers too. An enamel pin, which we got to order, but it's an enamel pin of the Kallattian symbol. So that'll be my first foray into enamel pinning, and will not be my last.
Nice.
And if you are a enamel pin collector out there,
yeah, I think they're cool.
Yeah, well, because we just hit 7,000 today, actually, we're going to get some interior art put in by Dewey Conway. He's already done 1 piece that you can see on the Kickstarter, and he's working on 3 more, and we're hoping to show those off before the end of the Kickstarter. So
nice.
Fingers crossed for that.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I've got a couple ideas. We'll see. I got to kind of do some reassessing and figure out. I really would love to offer sprayed edges as something that can be added on for backers that want them.
Yeah.
But that can be a bit of a commitment, because I really don't want to do can spray just because of the smell. And so if I can get an airbrush, and I have experience as a painter, like of miniatures, I just haven't done airbrushing. So I can paint. So it should be great. And I'll do some test runs and show those off first. But if I can get a good airbrush so we can do a really good spray edging on anything, I'll do it on a paperback. It's fine.
That'd be awesome.
That would be great. Yeah.
Very cool.
It's funny going into bookshops now and literally like all of these books have sprayed edges from the publishers, and it was like, why hasn't this been a thing before?
I know it makes it so much harder to not grab them when you see just the pretty sprayed edges.
Yeah. It's a little thing, so it almost helps justify the expense of really expensive hardbacks.
Oh yeah,
that it's just it's pink on the side now. It's like, okay, cool, I'll do it.
Yep. I'm in. Yeah, exactly. Did you see that one? Was it for shoot? Now I can't remember which one it was, but if you bend the pages one way, it's one picture. If you bend them the other way, it's a different picture.
Who just did that?
I know it was a dragon one. I can't remember if it was Dragon Mage or
I think it was Dragon Mage. Yeah,
I think it was, right. Yeah.
One side was the cover of Dragon Mage, the other side was with the interior art.
Yeah. That was cool. It's like,
so cool.
How did somebody think of how to do that? It's wild.
Yes. And the setup for having to do that sort of thing, having to build a saddle to do that is a lot of work. Wild.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Now, did you do the art for the covers too?
I did.
Yeah.
I spent the last year kind of revamping my art from. I mean, I went to school for art and stopped doing it and was writing and so it's one of those things where there are things that you should not do.
Right.
Generally, you don't do your own cover. That's generally a good rule to follow.
Yeah. Right.
Unless you have a graphic design background.
Right.
And I have a graphic design background and enough corporate trauma to feel like I'm not good enough. And so it took long enough for me to feel that I was confident enough to do it. Mm-hmm. And that took all these books that we've laid out over the course of the years to say, you know what, if I really spend the time, I can do the work on the cover. In the case of these, I mean, it's not like I didn't paint the whole thing. A lot of it's graphic design, but the actual characters themselves, people in my past who know my art, like, oh, that totally looks like your style, which makes me kind of like freeze up because I stopped doing art because of people criticizing my style. No. And
I think they're great, man. When you just mentioned that, I was like, wait, does he do his own art too? Like, that's sick.
Yeah, I didn't do it on the old Deathless Beast stuff. That was some other stuff. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to kind of get back to some of my roots for that use. In the case of Quaint Creatures, though, that was kind of the test, because Quaint Creatures is me too. That one I ended up painting with gouache, and then I went into Photoshop and kind of cleaned it up so it would be good and clean and the way I wanted it. So I did that one too. So that was kind of the test to say, okay, I think I could do this style. My wife and I were both like, the inspiration for Quaint Creatures came from watching All Creatures Great and Small. And when you watch the new one, the opening montage is this kind of watercolor print style, like for going on like a tour to somewhere in England. And we're like, oh, we really want that on our covers. And so we just started playing around with how can we even pull this off ourselves, looking at people trying to sort of say how to do it online. And we're like, okay, let's just, and then eventually we both kind of figured it out at the same time. And we're like, okay, we could do this. And so we started doing that for our covers, and we're having a blast.
Heck yeah. Well, they look awesome, dude.
Thank you.
I mean, they're I have these because I saw the covers and I'm like, I gotta have it. I got FOMO. I gotta have it in my hand.
Yeah. Because I wanted something that was evocative of something like Legends and Lattes, but was not the same.
Right. But was its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see a lot of other covers and I can see that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm too much of a, closet rebel to not want my own style.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it paid off because this definitely gives cozy vibes. But
my hope for that series is each of the covers you'll be able to put them face out and it'll be a montage of stories going from left to right. So
all right.
Yeah.
That's like I love when authors do that. I feel like that's such a cool thing. You don't see it often, but when you do, like, that's sweet. That's like a selling point in itself.
It's one of the advantage to indie, right? Is because we get to freedom. Semi-rapid release, right? We can plan things out way ahead of time, versus when you look at traditional and there's three years between books sometimes, you have a totally different department working on your cover than you did last time, and they may think highly enough of themselves, they think, no, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to do this new cover that has nothing to do with the old one. It's like I
hate that.
The new Jim Butcher book 2.
The Olympian one. Yeah, I like the old one way better.
Yes. And the fact that they released book 2 with that a court of thorn and roses style cover, and then they re-released his old cover to match that one, and I'm like, I don't want this. I want Sky Captains.
I know. I know. I agree. I know. I have it, and I was like, what?
So mad.
So yeah, like I'm hoping that someday they'll come out with, because I'm sure enough people were like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Where I hope they come out with a cover that matches the other one, but I probably shouldn't hold my breath. But
no. I don't know.
I know that is a bummer. Or like when they make them the font on the spine way different, or like mix it all up, and you're like,
or when a book is an inch shorter than the rest of them.
I hate that. Come on. I know. I hear you, man. All right, so I guess I am curious. Okay, one thing I do want to ask before I go into, I want to kind of talk about how long you're thinking of the Kickstarter and all that. But there's one thing I wanted to ask, and I don't want to forget. Like, your characters have such cool names. Like, how did you come up with the names for the characters in this series? Like, how does that happen?
I'm really obsessed with naming conventions.
Okay.
Really obsessed. Like I'll DNF a book if it has bad names. I won't throw anybody under the bus, but the Legend of Dritz, I'll throw that under the bus. I open it up and then I crack it to the middle, and like all the name, it was the same naming convention for every single race. And it was like, come on, I know you're going for D&D, but we can do better. Anyway, so I'm super obsessive about it. A lot of the main characters in the Kallattian Saga, their names have been around since the 90s when I was a kid. So they're names that have just kind of stuck around. And then I don't know where I do a lot of subtle world building with my names by choosing cultural. I'll open up behind the name and crack it open and go, okay, this is my Hungarian culture, so I need to use Hungarian names. And so I'll pick Hungarian names and then change them a little bit so they're not exactly even that, and then go sideways from there. I try to avoid like the plague, except for I might have 4 normal names in the Kallattian Saga, like ones you can find in our world, but they're not modern. Like Dorian is a good example, and Dane is a good example. Yeah, those are normal names. But Killian even too. So. Yeah.
But it's not just like Bob or
right. When I really want to name somebody, what I will often do is I will go in depth to figure out why a name exists. So like the best example I use is that if you look at biblical names that end with EL, it usually means something of God, because El, it was the Israeli was the Israelite word for God. And so a lot of names you can do that with. They're like, well, that means I can't have a Nathaniel in my book, because Nathaniel, I don't have an L in my book. I have other gods. And so I'll take a name like that and say, but I want a Nathan something. So what if I name him Nathaniab, because Aben is one of the main gods. And so if he's from a culture that worships God, we can say Nathan Ab. Okay, I can do that. So I'll do little changes. They aren't just changes for the sake of changes. I'll change them at their root.
Right.
So they feel normal.
The world. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Because I don't want you to feel. I don't want the names to be so weird that you're like, I can't even read this. Right.
Right.
Unless they're not human.
Right. Right.
And so I really want you to feel comfortable, but I also want you to know that this is 100% not our world.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Do you go through that process with like every character you name, or just like the main ones?
No, just a few. Some if I really like a name and I think it'll sound good on the tongue, then I'll say, wait a minute, is this a good name to do that with? And then I'll check the root and just double check that I'm not using Nathaniel or stuff, something like that. Okay. And then I did the same thing with animals too. There's no normal animals in the Kallattian Saga. They were all replaced with mythological. But then I spent way too much time building an actual food chain for each biome. Man. So I'll say, okay, I need an apex predator. I think we'll put the griffin in here. A version of a griffin is going to be my apex predator, but it's only a panther size. So what's my griff for that section? So I've got a whole spreadsheet of here's the griffins of all different sizes, in the same way that might have birds, and say, here's my raptor for this section. Well, I'll replace them so I can make sure I have, I can't use a full-size manticore here because the apex predator is a griffin, but I can have little manticores. And so how do I have a small cat-sized manticore? Oh, look, now there's a house core. And so instead of cats, there's manticores. Instead of dogs, there's infalds, which are basically pangolins. Yeah. That's
sweet, man. I'm a nerd at heart. So now that you're talking about that, like, I'm gonna need you to do like a video on going through those spreadsheets.
Yeah, I love it.
Talk about it all. That's so cool.
Yeah, one of the first things you'll run into are my Sleipnirs, because there's no horses. It's all 6-legged horses.
Oh, dude, that's sweet.
And even though I know Sleipnir's supposed to have 8 legs, but I made that mistake, wrote the whole book, and then went, screw it, we'll leave it with 6.
It's your world.
It's my world. I can do whatever I want.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah,
I'm pumped. I cannot wait. Now, when do you think fulfillment will be?
Yeah. So Kickstarter will close on the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
It can take as much as 3 weeks to get all of the legal stuff with Kickstarter resolved. And that means the money comes to me. Right.
Right.
And then as a Kickstarter creator, I send out a survey to double check that you're spending what you've submitted as a pledger for what you want. So like, say you got the big box and you also have other things, and then maybe a week later I say, but also we're going to have these other stickers. You want those too? And you might add more money in, or you might say, nope, I actually want that set of stickers instead of that set of stickers. Or actually, can you just send me 4 of the same book so I can give them to all my friends? Then I know what my order is, and then I can place my order. My goal is to have everything early to mid-October, so I can at least know that my first shipments have arrived by the end of October to the first.
Oh, wow.
To everybody.
That's a great turnaround.
Yeah.
Like some Kickstarters take a year. Like they take forever.
Yes.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, but right now books, there's some pretty good channels for printing, and I'm trying a new printer right now who has really good customer service. Zach Diamante, ZS Diamante used them.
Awesome.
So I already have somebody who said I use it and it works well, and it's like that's all I want to hear.
Yeah, that's
so
good enough.
We should have fast turnaround.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And did you say they were local to you too?
Just the dust cover printer.
Oh, the dust. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back. Kind of tell, like, how long ago did you start thinking about a Kickstarter? Like, from the time you made this, were you like, oh, it'd be sweet to do a Kickstarter someday, or did that come along like later on?
So when I was working as a game designer, I knew there was another company who I knew who had a Kickstarter. That's when I kind of really got reintroduced to Kickstarter, big $1 million Kickstarter. Oh, yeah. And then, all of the nightmares of it not being fulfilled and taking 5-10 years for the last one to finally arrive. Literally 10 years it took. And I ran a Kickstarter for one of my games and failed and ended up canceling it halfway through because I didn't know what I was doing. And that was, 10 years ago. So I kind of had that PTSD a little bit, that I was very, very afraid to push go. And my wife too is like, are you sure you know what you're doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I hope so. And so it's always been in the back of my head that I wanted to do it. And I understand what Kickstarter can be used as a pre-order method and a way to reach an entirely different clientele, because the people who shop, there are people who just shop on Kickstarter. They are not in the book community. They're there for the collector pieces.
Yes. Yep.
And so it's a different clientele. And so I whinged and took my time and wasn't sure and was trying to figure out artwork for it. And but I really started building this Kickstarter, like actually putting it together probably about a year ago.
Okay.
And then in earnest actually building the Kickstarter page in, what are we in now? August, in May.
Okay.
So that I knew I had all started to get my assets together and get my quotes that were going to be accurate together and rechecked, so that I could push go in August. But I still, I didn't have a whole lot of pre-Kickstarter campaign, because it was also like with all of indie, it's kind of everything's on the fly. So I finally had everything ready, but I knew I needed to get it launched for August so we could have books out by Christmas.
Right.
And not just for Christmas, but because like my wife has a Christmas book coming out. We'd like to start that, but it's really unwise to run a second Kickstarter until your first Kickstarter has at least arrived at one person's house. To prove, because then
it's gonna come through. Yeah.
Exactly. Because backers will be like, well, they're already launching a Kickstarter. They haven't even released. They haven't given us their last book. Yeah. So it's important to do that. You can't just run consecutive Kickstarters over each other without fulfillment being reached. Which is why you see game companies that will be a whole year between, because they run the Kickstarter and then it's a year before their game is produced.
Make it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's really unsmart to do Kickstarters over the top of each other.
That makes sense. Yeah. So what Christmas book does she have coming out?
So last year she released so my wife's a mystery author. And she wrote a book last year that she released called Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman.
Oh, yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
Boom.
There it is. So that's book one. And it's about Sam Shovel, who's a snowman who comes to life at the North Pole every year for 12 days. And he solves murder mysteries for Santa Claus.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And so she's written the second book.
Nice.
And we're going to kickstart.
You're going to say it was Sam Shovel.
Yes, it's Sam Shovel, and it's called Murder on the North Pole Express.
Nice.
Yes. So it'll be a train mystery.
You guys are good at titles.
Yeah, we love our titles. Yeah, it's part of that obsession with names. Yeah, so that's going to come out, and so we'll do that as a very short Kickstarter, probably like the last 2 weeks in October, so we can then order them and have them in people's hands by Christmas. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool.
That'd be great.
And I will also link you guys' website where you sell all your books too, down below, if you want to buy the first Sam Shovel mystery or any of Andrew's other books or his wife's other books.
Yeah. And of course, our audiobooks are everywhere too. Yes. So if you're like, I prefer Spotify, it's there.
Boom. Yep. Awesome. Very cool. So I guess we've talked a lot about the Kickstarter. I guess I kind of want to give you a chance to just talk about, I'm always very interested in when I get to talk to authors and like their journey.
Yeah.
So like, I'm just curious, like have you always, I know that you've done art a long time before in the past, but have you always wanted to write? Did you write when you were younger? Like, what was your first thing you wrote?
Yeah.
Like, not published, but like just all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm a 90s kid. Like grew up in the 90s. I'm an 80s kid technically.
But what year were you born?
82.
Ooh, 83.
Yeah.
We're real close.
Yeah, so you know it.
So I know.
Yeah. So the early 90s when I read the Bulgariad.
Nice.
And was obsessed as a 10, 12-year-old. Too obsessed because my first book I really wanted to write, called The Kallattian Quest, was a complete ripoff of that book.
Oh no.
It was literally if you've read the Bulgariad, Gary.
I haven't read it.
Okay. Well, he grows up on a farm and there's three characters, 3 kids at the farm, and I was obsessed with those 4 kids, and so like it was basically a fanfic of those 4 leaving the farm. I have never read The Wheel of Time, but basically The Wheel of Time, only 12-year-olds, right?
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of the characters as they exist now are nothing like them, but a lot of their names come back to a lot of that.
That's cool.
And so I liked the idea of writing a book. And I liked the idea so much, I wrote a proposal to Tor and sent it in saying, I'm a kid, so you should totally hire me because it'll make us millions. You should pay me to write a book.
Oh, you really wrote that?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's either on somebody at Tor's desk.
No. Yeah.
Or my parents said, yes, we'll mail it. And they never did. I don't know. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But I was still obsessed all through high school and college, and spent most of my classes in college taking notes for the world. So a lot of the world building goes way back to then. And I tried to write it in 2010. And I wrote it. It was 100,000 words, and it was a garbage book. And by garbage, I mean it was really hot garbage. It was really bad. And so I had friends reading it who were like literary classes, and it's good, Andrew, that's great. It was bad. So and I kind of knew it. I kind of knew in my heart that it wasn't that good. So I stopped working on it, was working as a game designer, which also had a lot of story writing to do. And I discovered Writing Excuses, the podcast, which is Brandon Sanderson's big podcast. He ran for like 12 seasons. Listened to that whole thing, realized through that how much I had to do to fix my story, and kind of spent that year and a half listening to the podcast and revamping everything, taking it all the way down to the skeleton and building it all the way back up. A lot of the characters stayed, but all the plot changed. And so it was kind of recasting them into a new setting, giving them new jobs, basically.
Okay.
And through that planning, I came out with an actual story that, well, it's worked. So the journey of they call it killing your darlings. I had to kill my darlings and say, okay, you're out, you're in, new villains, new quest. Let's do a new story. Yeah.
Was that hard for you, or was it?
It was very hard.
I bet. Yeah.
It was hard until I separated my main characters into their own stories. And suddenly, like the paladin Jinnid writes himself, because he had his own story to tell. He wasn't just this tag along character to the other characters. He had his own story, and he grew massively from that. And so if I have to write a Jinnid chapter, I'll have it done in a day, and it'll be good. And I can look back and read it and say, hey, I wrote that. That's cool, because he's just too easy to write.
That's awesome. I see you're drinking something. If you
Water.
guys haven't yet, grab yourself a snack, maybe a thirst-quenching refreshment. I got a Coke Zero Sugar. What are you drinking there, Andrew?
Water. Just water tonight. Yeah.
Water in that sweet
mug? Yeah, I don't have any beer in the house right now, and I already had several sodas today, so I got to stop.
Smart man.
Yeah.
Smart man. Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure once you separate them, like you said, and all of a sudden it probably became fun.
It was
to just expand each of those characters even more.
Yeah, and some are harder to write than others. Katiam, I think today Kay was saying that she's just loving the Katiam chapters. She's really hard to write because she's not based on anybody I know. And so it requires a lot of
so all original.
It's all original. So I spend a lot of mental anguish on her chapters to get it right because I don't want to screw her up, because she's from book one, the very first major female protagonist.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of funny when you read the 4 books together. By the end, you're like, are there any dudes in this? Because Hannon and Jinnid stick through the whole thing, and they're main characters. But as I add new points of view, the ones that just kind of appeared as new points of view ended up being other female characters who were already in the story, but they just kind of get more stage time, and it just ended up naturally how it ended up playing out. Yeah,
that's awesome. Very cool. So yeah, I guess what is that? Because I always wonder, is that hard to try to sure you write like a really good female protagonist, or do you feel like once you get going, it's not that different than writing a really good male protagonist?
It can be. Because I'm a guy myself, so I'm writing what I don't know in a lot of ways, and obviously there's the shared human experience is easy to write easy to write in that sense. But I do spend a lot of time anguishing over am I doing anything, not just bad representation, but like am I making poor plot decisions? Am I accidentally fridging a character? Versus showing them as having an actual, and sometimes you just have to say screw it and just do it.
You gotta tell your story.
Yeah, you're going to tell your story, and you need to look back later in edits, and that's when you want to examine it and say, okay, am I doing a good job as to telling a real person's story? In the case of this, there's an event at the end of book 2 that's a major traumatic event for a lot of people, and so book 2, 3, and 4 are kind of an examination of a ton of different paths you can go down going out of a trauma.
Okay.
So how does everybody deal with it? How do you represent, fight or flight, freeze or fawn? How do you represent each 4 of those coming out of a trauma and show how people react, or that somebody acts one way before the trauma, what kind of change their psyche is going to occur after that? And how do you do that? And some of it's conscious, some of it just happens naturally. And then you realize that you subconsciously put them into a slot you didn't think you were going to have them in. Or I've had several characters now that, 2 characters in this particular who have very kindly asked to be members of the cast where they weren't before, where they were just tertiary characters who were going to be passing characters. They would show up every once in a while, but they're kind of a window dressing. And they were like, yeah, but what if I had a plot? You're like, you know what? You've been a very good employee. I'm going to give you a promotion. And you give them a promotion and you just see what happens. And it can cause major havoc with your plot.
Right.
One in particular changed everything for plans I had for one character. In fact, it changed because of that. It changed the end of book 4, but I didn't have that plan because I'm a major planner. So people who are pantsers, who write just by the seat of their pants, will say like, yeah, that's just how you write pantsing. And it's like, I get that, but it's only 2 characters and it messed everything up and I had to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, you do what you can and that's okay. That's part of the storytelling process. And that's why you edit.
Right. Yep. Right. I was going to ask next. I know we've talked, you like to plan things out. You're a plotter.
Yep.
Like you said, sometimes you have to. I had never heard that term until you told me that, like a pantser, writing by the seat of your pants. Now you said is your wife a pantser?
No, she's a
plotter.
So like, do you know the D&D alignment chart of So you got good versus evil, chaotic versus neutral versus lawful. There's a whole. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Are you chaotic or lawful? And I am a lawful plotter. My wife is a chaotic plotter. So but she's a mystery author. So she writes the end first.
Oh, okay.
And then she She knows what the
Right.
crime that was committed. She can write backwards, but then she goes, oh, because of that, I want to write this scene, and she'll write this scene, and then this scene, and then this scene, and this scene, and then she just has it organized, and then and then she fills in everything in between that needs to be filled in between.
Oh, okay.
So she can write all over the place, and I have to write linearly from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
But I plan everything. Where my chaos comes in is I don't plan it to the words. Like some people will say on a spreadsheet, here are the words that this person's going to say. I need a conversation. This person here, this person here, this person here. Whereas I write bullet points, and a bullet point I try to keep shorter than 1 or 2 lines, and that bullet point represents 1,000 words of plot. And then as characters are in the scene, they can say whatever they want. As long as the plot point occurs, they can do whatever they want. And that allows me to plot out the action and the tension, but also let my characters grow as they need to. And because of that, I'm not forcing words in their mouth, and I'm not forcing world building in their mouth. And so my world building tends to come across a lot more organically because of that.
Okay, that was the next thing I was going to get into a little. Like, I'm so pumped to read that series, but I haven't started it yet. I listened to the audiobook a little bit, but I have read a good chunk of Thrice. Yeah. And so 2 things. One, I'm going to ask about world building in a second, but I would say, and I don't know if you see yourself this way, but I feel like your stories and your writing is character driven. Would you say that? Yes. Yes. I love that.
Yeah, it is because I let them be, or I wouldn't. Is it character driven? The plot is not, but the characters inform the plot.
Right. The characters definitely are a big part of your stories. I feel like. I just noticed that when you're talking about like the tragedy and getting into how the characters deal with it, like I that got me pumped. Like that's awesome. Like to read, like I feel like your writing is just very real, even when it's fantastical.
Thank you.
And Thrice, like there's just some good dad stuff in there, man. It's good stuff.
I wrote that when my son was 4 years old. So that's where Leaf came from.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can feel that in there. Like that's awesome.
I had like maybe 2 early comments. Someone was like, "Kids don't talk like that," and I'm like, "Well, you don't know children then."
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's exactly how 4-year-olds talk. They're way too philosophical, and they ask you questions you do not have answers for.
Right.
And I loved putting that in there and having no shame to do so, because like you don't, you know what? Not my problem. You don't know kids.
Yeah.
That's a you problem.
Right. I love it. I mean, I could just picture it. I could envision it, like. Because same thing. People are probably shocked when they have kids and they realize what their kids will say and do at that young of an age.
Right.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So how do you go about world building? That's what I was going to ask. Like, what's your process? Like, I mean, I know you've been thinking about that story for a long time.
Yeah.
The Kallattian Saga. Like when you're first starting out, like how, like. I guess you kind of had some inspirations, you said, from the Bellegarde a little bit. But if you were creating a world, like I know you use spreadsheets and stuff.
Sure.
So you get into it. But like, what's your first step when you first are like, okay, I need to create this world for the character, the story to take place in? Like, where do you start?
Well, I tell new writers, do not do what I did. Don't spend 20 years planning a world. It's too long, and honestly, you've overplanned, because there's things that you're not going to use and you don't care about by the time you get around to it. So don't do what I did. But really, it's kind of build yourself a really messy Wikipedia article. Something really fast that you can work with. In the case of Thrice, like I mentioned, I didn't plan very much for that one. I told myself I was going to plan until NaNoWriMo, so I had like 6 weeks to plan. So I spent some time saying, okay, what do I want to accomplish with this? I wanted to write a short story. I had the idea that I wanted to write a Man and Boy on the Road story, so a Lone Wolf and Cub story. I wanted to do something that I was like, well, what subgenres could emerge in the next year or so? And this, of course, was right before Witcher was announced. And this is right and the book came out right before Mandalorian, or it came out right after Mandalorian came out. So I wrote it all before that, but it was like, there's not a lot of Russian fantasy, and I was stupid. I didn't know what The Witcher was at the time, but I was like, there's not a lot. But when you look back historically, there has been a lot of Slavic fantasy. It's just never had a huge subgenre in the way that like Cozy does right now.
Right.
So like, I have to take a risk. Maybe Slavic's gonna show up. I'm gonna write a Slavic one. Why Slavic? Well, because I know my European, I know my Western European mythology. Slavic mythology and Central and Eastern European mythology is just to the left of what I know. So I get to do a little bit of Wikipedia research and learn something new, but not feel completely out of my depth. So I'll play with that. So I said, okay, let's do that. I'm also at the time, and I still am, but I was really big on Usagi Yojimbo comics at the time, and I liked the storytelling method of every couple issues is on the road, and it's going to share something. Like these 2 chapters are going to share something about a troll. These 2 chapters of this, and every kind of vignette way. That's kind of stations along the road. So I said, okay, those are my challenges. I need something I can do that's Slavic, man and boy, and let's go. And so I wrote like 30 at the time. I think I had 30 chapters planned, and so I wrote 30 things that I wanted to accomplish and said, does this look like a plot? It looks like a plot. And then as I needed to, I would go in and research something and say, okay, well, I need this village to feel like this thing I remember from Fiddler on the Roof, so let's go. That's an excuse to go watch Fiddler on the Roof tonight. And so I get to watch that and get inspiration and say, okay, I'm going to capture the feeling of this for this chapter because that's what matters right now. So you can be very fluid in your planning. You can also go crazy. I mean, like I have my spreadsheets also included like the moon cycles, and I have 2 moons in Kallattai, so I have the whole moon cycle arc figured out. So that awesome. When I say it's eerie because it's red, because the red moon is out and it's only a half moon, so it's going to be darker than that, I can actually evoke that as opposed to, oh look, it's another full silver moon. It's like right. That movies do that. Like every other night is a full moon. Yeah, like, no,
right. It's not realistic, right?
Exactly. Or I might say, wait a minute, no, it's a half moon, and so the moon doesn't come up until after midnight. If I want moonlight, I can't have this happen until after midnight. It has to be right before dawn. And so I'll try to do that. And, it's a subtle thing that no reader is going to be like, boy, you sure planned that out. But it's real. And so to me, it's real. And so there's a integrity to that. But I don't, like I said, I don't suggest everybody do that. Best example of what not to do is to show off your world building, like your coinage. Like going in and saying, now that we're in this little country the size of Netherlands, here is the currency we're going to be using. It's like, no. There's one currency for this portion of the world of these 5 countries. And then you suddenly say, now they're using paper money because you're in a different country. You can never say how much it's valued. You just, by handing cash around, you now have set a value for that money without going into a dungeon master's level importance of what the trade value between gold, silver, electrum, and copper is. You don't need to do that. Right. And you may have planned that. That's good for you. I'm glad you planned that. You don't need to tell us all that.
Right. Yeah.
Because it will show up in your 2-star reviews.
Yeah, I can see that. Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah. So let's take a little sidestep from writing. I am curious, like your reading, you talked about like your introduction to fantasy. Yeah. Like what's some of your other, like, now is fantasy like your main genre, or were there other genres that really got you when you were younger reading and stuff?
I read mostly fantasy when I was younger. Me too. Around the time I was writing my book, I was kind of done with fantasy. So this is like 2009. And so I kind of for a year quit reading fantasy and switched over to like historical stuff. So I was reading Pillars of the Earth and Name of the Rose and a little bit of horror. I don't do a lot of horror, but I will say that Richard Mathis' I Am Legend anthology is so good. So I don't do a lot of horror, but I was kind of trying a few things, just different. And then someone handed me Brandon Sanderson, and it was like, oh, there is good fantasy again. This is cool. It's different. And I know it's not true. It's not that there wasn't good fantasy. Just nothing was floating my boat.
Right. But that gotcha.
Yeah. Early on, though, Robin Hobb was a huge influence. At least the Farseer trilogy. I had not gotten to the other ones because they were so sad, and I was dating and falling in love, and I didn't need that right then.
You didn't need that in your life.
Yeah, and though I've since gone back, and so more recently, like just in the last since 2018, I've discovered a lot of really great authors from yesteryear that I wish I had known existed. But the more I look at it, I'm like, I would have bounced off of them so hard even in college. But Jenny Wirtz, if you haven't read, Jenny Wirtz, it's exquisite. But you got to be ready for high level literary. Yeah. Lois McMaster Bujold. I was listening to her.
I've always wanted to. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if you like sci-fi, she's got great sci-fi. I think her sci-fi is very, very classic in 90s sci-fi. So like if you are a big Battlestar Galactica or not Deep Space Nine, that too though, but Babylon 5. That's the style, that Imperial style, right?
Yeah.
But then in 2000s, she switched over to fantasy and wrote Curse of Chalion, which blew my mind. It was just so well written. And then I was also Brian McClellan's Powder Mage. Yep. So this was right before COVID, when there was only a few free books on libraries for audiobooks. I was driving home listening to those. And now you can listen to anything on library, but that year alone I read, and that's when I also reread Hobb. All Farseer, had to pull the car over and cry for 10 minutes at the end of the first book. All of the Live Ship trilogy, and now I read one book in Tawny Man, and I'm trying to read one book a year because I don't know if I can handle more than that.
That's good though. That's good. Oh man, I have I still haven't read any of Hobb. I need to. I've got the Farseer trilogy. I got to read it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to read.
There is so much to read. There's not enough time.
Not enough time. No.
Now,
when you're writing, do you also, are you just locked in and you like reading not work with like your process when you're writing?
It's difficult. I have to be very careful what I read while I'm writing. I was writing Deathless Beast, and was when I first tried a Terry Pratchett, and I had to stop because my characters kept trying to be funny. And I was like, stop it. You're not doing this. So I can't listen to Terry Pratchett when I'm writing. But when I'm editing, I will often listen to a P.G. Wodehouse book. He wrote 1940s Lazy Rich comedy. So Butler and Master, and everything goes wrong, and how do they fix it at the estate? I love reading those, and there's great audiobooks out there for that, especially while I'm editing, because it elevates my English. And so I suddenly just feel smarter, and so my editing just tends to be a lot cleaner when I do that. But if I'm in full draft mode, I really can't read. It gets in the way of what I'm trying to accomplish, and I can't focus on it because my focus is on what I'm writing. But even though I write a lot when I'm writing, that's only for a few months out of the year. I'll have a couple months where I'm just cramming. And then it's a lot of time spent editing and doing all that. And I can read during that. That's not a problem.
So just when you're zoned in, just writing, like that's
exactly
your focus.
But just like someone the other day asked me what if I listen to music while I write, and I don't. I put in literally the Rohan theme on YouTube, and it's just got Flyovers of Edoras. That's what I play. And sometimes I'll put in battle music or like a fantasy lo-fi or a lo-fi girl. But even that can be distracting because it's something new, and my brain's like, "Oh, that's new. I should listen to that." Rohan can just roll over me, and it feels fantasy. Yeah, that's my go-to.
That's awesome. Very cool. So besides reading, do you watch TV or streaming shows, movies, like all that kind of stuff? What's your jam for that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm in writing and I'm burnt out, we'll spend an evening or two watching some stuff. I mean, can't go wrong with Lord of the Rings, but like at least once or twice a year we'll watch Firefly.
I love Firefly.
Yeah, Ocean's 11's another really good. Nice. You know, if there's, I have like a list of like 10 movies, and I kind of move them around. But like my 10 favorite movies are usually the ones that are the absolute tightest writing. We just introduced the kids to Back to the Future and watched all 3 of them over like 6 different nights. Oh man, what a perfect script!
It is
perfect script. The callbacks and the reference forwards, and I know that like when they're writing 2 and 3, they were thinking of number 1, right? You can't help but watch number 1 and go, they have to be thinking of number 2 and 3.
I know.
And like, did you realize that like the inside doors to Doc's lab in the Old West are the same as the doors in his garage in number 1? Not exactly the same, but the shots are the same and the same kind of framing, because it's kind of a stable style door.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's so many of these little references that they're trying to get the shots same but slightly different. Like they'll shoot it from 2 degrees to the side, and you're like, this is such a great callback. Not just in the dialogue, not just in who's there, not just the fact that there's a set piece of a diorama that's not in scale, but the fact that it's there, and you're like, it's just what a great trilogy.
Oh yeah, it is, man. It is. It's probably been like 10 years since I watched it. I gotta watch it. I got it. Yep. My son is getting ready to turn 15, and that's one he hasn't. It's time to watch it again.
It is time. Yes, it is.
Yeah, those are so good. So yeah, that what about like stuff now? Like, have you seen any movies or watched any shows, like newer stuff that you like?
What did we just see? Have you seen Inside Out too?
Yeah, yes, I did.
Oh my gosh.
That was good.
It was so good.
Good.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't suffer from anxiety, but I know plenty of people who have, and it was like that is such a perfect representation of it.
Yep.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
No, it was really good. I love when I take my kids to see a movie and it ends up being like really good, and I love it too. Oh yeah, so good. What was the other one recently? Not recently, but when it came out. What's the one with the guy? It's kind of a love story. The guy's water and the girl. Is that Elementals? Is that what it was called? Something like that.
Oh, that was by Pixar.
Yeah.
Right. No, I haven't seen that one yet. No.
Oh, that one was really good too. That was one where I was like, I think I was more invested than my kids were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've seen Onward.
Oh yeah. Oh, that one, man. That one got me teary eyed at the end.
That was the inspiration for this one.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Great.
Onward. I say Onward meets All Creatures Great and Small, because that was the inspiration. I wanted an Onward world about a veterinarian. And
very cool. Very cool. I loved Onward, so that's good.
I loved it. Yeah, I cried at that one too.
Oh, dude, it's so good. Talk about dad stuff in that one too, and the brother stuff. Oh man, it got me good. I was like texting my brother like, I love you, man. That was good stuff. All right, so after this Kickstarter, you've got the 4th book coming out. I know that you are, because you're gonna have the 3rd book of Needle and Leaf come out too, right? That's in the works.
Yes.
So once those are both done, like then you got other series, the Cozy Fantasy series. Yep. So are those your main things right now, or do you have something new that you're working on in the background too?
I do, but it's several years before I'm ready to do that one. But so I've written the first third of both Needle and Leaf 3.
Nice.
There will be 4 of them, and that I'm really hoping to have both 3 and 4 out next year.
Awesome.
And then for the Sideways Tales, I've written close to half of the next cozy.
Okay.
Which is about 2 characters from Quaint Creatures, 2 side characters opening up a pie truck.
That's so cool.
And then I have plans for another cozy with another secondary character from from Quaint Creatures who turns his dungeon into a theme park. So that'll be like The Office meets a theme park. So I hope that's my plan for the next year. If I can get those 4 books for next year, that leaves me room to start working on the next Kallattian's books. So I'm not going to go on to book 5. We're going to actually go back 70 years to the Protectorate Wars, which are referenced in there. So it'll go back to the generation that's passing the torch now. I want to do them as kids, as young people.
Okay, very cool.
And but that's going to be a war story. So that'll be 4-book war story, probably a ton of novellas that are adjacent to it. If I play my cards right, hopefully we'll do like a miniatures game related to that. So I can do a tabletop miniatures war game.
Okay.
And then after that, I'll pop back and finish Kallattian 5 through 8 to finish the story. But it's not just because I really want to go back, but there's some forget the word, but some mirroring that's going to occur both in the Protectorate Wars and 5 through 8. Okay. And I want to make sure that I have both of those planned so that they pull off. Yeah. Okay.
Nice. That's exciting, man. So I'm going to get to be in this world for a long time.
But if I do it right, I should get through 8 by 2030.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But that's only the first half of the story.
Only the first half?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's exciting. That's awesome.
So I'm doing my own little Cosmere, but in literally just one world.
That's okay. That's sweet, man.
Because I can. Yeah.
That's good. Well, and I mean, you obviously love writing in that world, so that's good. That's so cool. Now, do you think when you do the covers for the prequel and the sequel stuff, is it going to be similar to those, or is it going to be something totally different, you think?
Similar. I've kind of pre-designed 5 through 8, and obviously there will be like little fixes I'll have to make when we get to that time. But so they will 100% match these 4. Because Protectorate Wars is a different series name, I will do something similar but different with that one, so they do stand out separately on the shelf. And you know, if because I do so much planning too, my goal will be that you can read Protectorate Wars as its own story. Like, I just want a war story. Like, I got you covered. Well, you can just read this series. And so I try to always keep the readers in mind for that sake.
Yeah.
When I get to 5 through 8, it's your own fault if you try to read 5 through 8 without reading 1, 2, 3, 4, because it literally says on the spine 1, 2, 3, 4. So that again, that's a you problem at that point.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But I also I love messing with timeline. So like that series of what I'm working on in the future, I have not just the concept. I'm heavily planning out a 5-book series that I will write eventually that is going to be told backwards. So like book 1 takes place after the other 4. And so but each book will be standalone and have its own in cohesion story, but there's a character who will go backwards through through the series as my through line. So that's why I can't do it for a couple years, because it has to be so heavily planned to make sure everything works, because it's timey-wimey. And if I pull it off though, it'll be chef's kiss.
That sounds like a heck of a ride.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. Very cool. So that is now you said it's going to be in the future, probably, right?
No, it'll be a fantasy. It's actually going to be a Sandalpunk fantasy. So Sandalpunk is like Ben-Hur or
so
it'll be a fantasy set in a very ancient culture.
Oh, that's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
All that awesome stuff coming up. That's awesome, dude.
Awesome stuff. Yep, I've always got new ideas, and you just gotta weigh which ones you actually want to work on, and honestly, you just got to do it. Like, if you're ever writing, you know, sometimes you'll hear advice that'll say, you know what, your really big idea, just hold on to that. Work on some other stuff first. And I disagree, because your cool idea is actually getting in the way of future ideas that you don't know exist yet. And so getting that out of your system is awesome.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's really good advice. That makes sense. Like, if you just keep thinking about this big thing and adding to it,
right?
You're not letting your creativity. You're blocking all the other things. That's so true.
Right, and because when we're younger, we think our great ideas are just the best, and as we get older, we look back and go, "It wasn't even my best idea."
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is in the way. It's the same.
Right.
It's the same thing. Why I suggest high school students need to actively write fanfic, and call it so. I didn't know my books were fan fiction, nor would my pride have let me admit that.
Right.
But if I had known that, if I had said I'm going to write fan fiction, I would have gotten a lot out of my system as a kid, so that as an adult I can tell stories that are waiting to be informed by my past. Right. So it's the same premise, you know. Not to say you shouldn't be professional and say, you know what, I really do want to write one other book first before my big one. I totally get that. But if it's like, I don't know, I'm going to get my career in order, write 10 more books, and then I'll write my big one. Okay, you can. But if you just put it to the side, it's going to sit there and just kind of fester. And then by the time you get to it, you'll be like, that's really not a good idea. I shouldn't work on that. If you had worked on it 10 years earlier, you have a time capsule of who you were 10 years ago, of the idea you thought was the greatest idea you had ever thought of. And it was, until now, 10 years later, you have this much better idea that wouldn't have existed if you hadn't had the shoulders of your old story to stand on.
Right. Yep. Very true.
Yeah.
Yep. Shoot, my mind just blanked. There was something else I was going to ask you before we were done. It's going to come back. Hold on. No, it's not. Oh, yes. I just remembered. All right. Are there any novellas in your Kallattian Saga right now?
Yes. There's one. Okay. It's called Fleeting Word. It is. I'm going to make it available as paperback for the first time with the Kickstarter. So that's available on there. Called Fleeting Word, and it takes place back in the Protectorate Wars at the end of the Protectorate Wars. So it's kind of a prelude postlude. So it kind of gives away intentionally the ending of the Protectorate Wars, which if you read Deathless Beast and Bone Shroud, you already know some of those answers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a little sweet novella about a paladin who is a pacifist, so he never went to war. But he's actually the main character of the series, of the Protectorate War series.
Okay.
And he's related by blood to the head of one order and best friends with the head of the other order. And he starts to uncover that there's somebody who's in danger because who they're related to is a very, very bad, evil person. So imagine if you discovered that Hitler's daughter is living at your monastery, and she's not to blame. So how do you save her? So it's that I can spoil that the prologue is Hitler's dead.
Right. Yeah.
And but he survived by somebody, and who is she? And will it create a witch hunt? And in all the meanings of the word witch hunt, if we go after her, or do we find her and try to rescue her? So that's the story of it. But it's also a very very cozy story. So it's very very, very slice of life.
Nice.
You could read it all alone. Some suggest that you should read at least through Bone Shroud before you read it. But it can be read alone.
Where do you suggest it should fall in? If people are going to do it in the order that Andrew D. Meredith would say, where would you put it?
I would read it after Bone Shroud or Gloves of Eons.
Okay.
In book 3. There's little spoilers kind of hidden in there that I make references to that are then referenced heavily in Gloves of Eons. But if you read those in any order, you'll start to see some of the connections.
Okay.
But I would read it after Bone Shroud.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool. Awesome.
And I want to write more. I will write other short stories. I have an idea for Zach Diamante did a whole bunch of short stories he compiled into a and each one of those chapters actually takes place between chapters in his first book.
And he tells you in the novella or the collection, like, read this before this.
Exactly. I would like to write a series of short stories or novellas that are about tertiary characters you meet along the way, and then tell the story of them either to the point when you meet them or after they walk away. Because the Kallattian Saga, even though a lot of the characters cross over with each other, it's not the kind of cohesion that you see in Wheel of Time, where everything's constantly threading in on itself and touching. And that happens, but I'm trying to tell a story of real people who each have their own lives to live. And so, and a lot of the characters are also kind of on the marginalia to the big plot points. And other ones are in the big plot points. Because I like the idea. You'll see that more when you read Thrice. That's really heavily happens. Is the idea that there's major things happening, but I'm telling the story over here.
Yes,
as the main things can continue to happen. And so that was always a goal of mine.
That's cool.
And that's that. If I write those short stories, I'll be doing that, and I'm hoping to tie them into some sort of fundraiser. Because the kind of a lot of the point of a lot of the paladins and the paladames is that they're serving the poor, the destitute, the abused, and that's their job, is to keep an eye out for that, but doing it in a way that also doesn't that deals with humanity as humanity is. So, you know, the paladames have secret vaults that women can come to shelter in. So it's like a women's shelter. Could they go out and just beat husbands up who are beating their wives? They certainly could, and cause a witch hunt. And so how do you in a real world setting deal with that in the same way that a women's shelter does today? How do you deal with that sort of thing? And so I would love to tell more of those stories of how do you deal with that? Because it's a huge moral dilemma. And I like writing about that sort of thing, because then you can have kind of a tragic ending, or have an ending that has a justice to it that makes you feel that you better understand the psyche of humanity. So I love that sort of thing.
That's awesome, man.
But it would be great to do those and do those as you can give me as much as you want for this book, and X proceeds will totally go to this particular mission or whatever. I'd love to do that sort of thing. But that takes time.
Cool. Oh yeah, for sure. That's an awesome idea though. Love it. Very cool. Well, you are getting me pumped, man. I'm so excited. This is awesome. Awesome stuff. So again, everybody, make sure you look in the description, back the Kickstarter. I did. I'm excited. And also, if you want any of his other books or his wife's books, in the description will be the link to their website. Do the audiobooks through your website too, where they can get to them?
I don't. By the end of this Kickstarter, though, I will have them available through Book Funnel. And that's a semi-direct way to do it. But audiobooks are kind of an old different animal for getting actual direct sales. I can direct sell books in print and in ebook as well. That can be purchased on the website. Audiobooks are just a different
beast. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, I will let you get back to your family, and I will get back to mine. But this was a lot of fun, man. So I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, no problem. And I'll give you one last time to just say whatever you want. The floor is yours.
All right. So follow Bearded Book Beast down below if you don't already, because it needs to happen. And let's get those followers. Let's get the followership up to 3,000 by the end of the year. Let's do it.
Yeah, I like that.
That's my pitch.
Wow, you're too kind. I appreciate it. Until I see you in the next video, beasties. Like I always say, devour those TBRs. Be brave, be beautiful to one another, and be beastly. And go support his Kickstarter.
Thank you.
We'll see ya.
Have a good night.